Members of the West Virginia National Guard are in critical condition in Washington, D.C. tonight after being shot outside a metro station where they were on patrol this afternoon, just a few blocks from the White House. That station, very heavily trafficked, just a few blocks from the White House, and the scene minutes after the shooting when, according to law enforcement, two other members of the Guard subdued the suspect, you see him on the ground there, who had just been shot multiple times. Officials say the suspect was taken into custody and transported to a local hospital for treatment. At a press conference today, federal and local officials gave this update on what happened and the status of the ongoing investigation, which is now being led by the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force.
At approximately 2:15 this afternoon, members of the D.C. National Guard were on high visibility patrols in the area of 17th and I Street Northwest when a suspect came around the corner, raised his arm with a firearm and discharged it at the National Guard members. The National Guard members, there were other members that were in the area. They were able to, after some back and forth, able to subdue the individual and bring them into custody.
Since this is an assault on a federal law enforcement officer, this will be treated at the federal level as an assault on a federal law enforcement officer. The FBI will lead out on that mission with our interagency partners, to include the Department of Homeland Security, Secret Service, ATF, DEA.
The White House was put on lockdown during the incident. The president and other top aides were not on the grounds today. Trump has been in Palm Beach all day for the Thanksgiving holiday. He was out golfing earlier, returned to his Mar-a-Lago residence just after the shooting. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that she was briefed on the shooting. Trump then promised on social media the shooter would, quote, pay a very steep price. We're starting to get some details now about the shooter. Joining me now with the latest, Mark Santia. He's MS Now investigative correspondent. Mark, what do we know?
Chris, multiple law enforcement sources tell MS Now the suspect is Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, 29-year-old Afghan national. Right now, investigators, they're working to know at what point he entered America, at what contact he's had with others. They want to know where he's traveled. They're also going to look at his devices. They want to speak to his friends and family. As you said, the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, they're leading this investigation. They believe this was an act of terror. They, the mayor, as well as police, they say this was a targeted shooting, an ambush. You heard the chief say the suspect came around the corner, immediately opened fire on the two National Guardsmen who are on post at that location. Comes around the corner, opens fire. Law enforcement sources tell us the shooter opened fire at, quote, point-blank range. Police also say at this time they don't believe there are any other suspects. They believe that he acted alone, that Lakhanwal acted alone. They think he was a, they want to know, though, who he was in touch with. So they don't believe there's any other suspects. Again, acted alone, but did he speak with others before taking this horrific action today? They're going to start also, Chris, to work backwards from that point where you saw the arrest video. They want to work backwards from there. Did he make any comments to the National Guardsmen as they were taking him into custody? Did he talk to anybody? How did he get there? Did he take the subway? Did he take a car? What interaction has he had? They also have the weapon. They're going to trace it. How was that obtained? Was it used in any other crimes? So there's a lot of work to do. Still at this point, a lot more questions than answers.
He is in a hospital. Do we know what condition he is in?
We don't know, Chris, at this point what condition. He was shot multiple times. He is expected to survive, is what we're hearing. But we don't know if he's able to communicate with investigators, or if investigators, obviously this is an exigent circumstance, so we don't know if they're able to communicate with him at this point.
You just said something important, because when I was watching earlier, when Kash Patel, who we saw there, who obviously the director of the FBI, came up, at the beginning of the press conference that was given earlier today, he said, we're going to bring the perpetrators to justice. And I thought I was mishearing, because I also thought that they had someone in custody, and then I didn't know if he was indicating some sense that there were others. But it sounds to me like that was just either he was speaking generally or misspeaking, but there's no sense that, I mean, this is the person they think.
No, there was a follow-up question later in the press conference, and that question was asked, and police were adamant that they believe this was a lone actor. I think to Director Patel's kind of comment is this sort of, you follow a lead where it takes you. And if there are other people who maybe he was in contact with or supplied information or anything to that effect, there could be more arrests down the line. But as far as this act of violence today, police believe a lone gunman, and that gunman, a 29-year-old Afghan national, again, Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, in custody in the hospital right now.
Afghan national, we have every reason to believe, was living in the U.S. and not... We think, we don't know.
Every reason to believe was living in the U.S. We don't know at what point, again, he may have entered the country,
right.
but we do believe at this point was living in the United States.
All right, Mark Sentia, thank you for all that latest. We will keep up with you. I know you've got more reporting to do. Tom Major served as the chief of the Capitol Police before retiring in May. He's now an MS Now law enforcement analyst. Rob D'Amico is an MS Now national security and counterterrorism analyst who serves as an FBI tactical operations specialist and survivor. They both join me now. Tom, obviously a sort of nightmare situation for those guardsmen who, have now spent several months on this deployment, doing a lot of what those guardsmen were doing. I mean, sort of visibility posts, essentially standing and being out as a presence more than anything.
That's exactly right. They are not trained law enforcement officers. Most of them have no law enforcement training or background. And so when they came here, it was not to be law enforcement officers. It was to be a presence, to be additional eyes for law enforcement and an additional presence in certain areas of the city. And one of the places that we often see them is in and around the metro transit centers, the subway for DC. And these officers or guardsmen were standing right outside the exit to the Farragut West Metro Center. And as was described, you had the shooter come around the corner. And this is why I think law enforcement, including myself, feel that this was an ambush, because you've got somebody that came right around a corner from out of sight and immediately shot these two guardsmen.
There's about 2,200 National Guard troops who've been deployed in Washington for several months now. That deployment, which was recently declared unlawful by a federal judge, that is being appealed. But obviously, Rob, these two guardsmen from West Virginia, which has quite a few people there, it's just bottomlessly awful to imagine their families getting that call today.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the governor of West Virginia put out that they had been deceased. And it was turned out to be false. So that information flow in the beginning is very chaotic. And that, I was on the news when they announced it, and I talked about it, and I was, devastated to hear that, and then to go back on it. So the families, they're in enough pain and suffering as it is. They're probably trying to reach them on the phone. Hopefully the guardsmen that weren't affected were able to call home, because it takes a while to do that whole chain of notification and stuff. So it's been a horrible day for them. And it's one of those things that you send your loved ones away. They're doing a mission, even if you agree with it or not. They're doing a mission, and this happens, and then you're trying to find out, and the news goes back and forth with things. So it's difficult. And now you have 500 more that are going to get deployed, and those families are probably now in the same thing. It's like when they were going over to Iraq and Afghanistan. It is very hard on a family to deploy like that.
Yeah, I want to play what the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had to say about ordering an extra deployment of 500. We should note that the Washington, D.C. National Guard is under command of the president, unlike the guards in the other 50 states, which are under the command of the governor. In this case, the commander-in-chief can just order that. Here's what Pete Hegseth had to say earlier. Take a listen.
After those meetings, myself and my team were notified that 2 National Guardsmen have been shot in Washington, D.C., critically wounded. The shooter shot in a cowardly, dastardly act, targeting the best of America, heroes willing to serve in Washington, D.C., serve for people they don't know and they've never met, because they love their country and their capital and their community. This happened just steps away from the White House. It will not stand. And that's why President Trump has asked me, and I will ask the Secretary of the Army, to the National Guard, to add 500 additional troops, National Guardsmen, to Washington, D.C.
As you can see, the Secretary of Defense was on official delegation to Dominican Republic today, meeting with officials there. Tom, let me just ask you, and again, I 100% understand in the wake of this the impulse to do something. it's not that clear to me that 500 more National Guardsmen is a responsive solution to the horrible tragedy we saw today.
Well, I would hope that the National Guard leadership is going to be clear about what these additional 500 troops are supposed to do. This is not a group, a large mass of people who are fighting against the National Guard being in Washington, D.C. The Guard has been, frankly, received fairly well by the public. Maybe a lot of people are neutral. A lot of people just see them, wave hi, and go on their way. This is not in any way a message that, the National Guard is not wanted in Washington, D.C. So my hope is that these 500 people that get here are told, look, you're here to enhance people's safety. And they're deployed as such, and not to all of a sudden, lay siege to the city in a way like that the Guard is under attack, and that they're going to fight that, because I think that sends the wrong message.
Rob, as my colleague Mark Santillo was just saying, we're going to trace back what happened with this individual. It looks like it was him. I don't think there's a ton of doubt at this moment. He ambushed them. In terms of what happened, one thing that did occur to me is that it's not easy to get weapons in Washington, D.C., quite famously. It's some of the most restrictive, it has been some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country. Obviously, the gun will be the first place I imagine this investigation is grinding right now.
Absolutely. ATF's doing hand searches. That's how they search for weapons. So they immediately, as soon as they got the gun, got the serial number, they started down that road to figure out where the gun was purchased, who purchased it, if it was a sale from a store, a legal store, or if it was a private sale. That's all being run down. As far as his residence, they're trying to figure out, did he live here? Was he renting here? Was he staying here? Did he come from somewhere else? All that's just going out. And the FBI, again, the FBI has agents now. If he was in a city, those agents are going out. They're swearing to the courts for search warrants. They're securing those things, and they're going to search them. And that's the one thing the FBI can bring so much resources to something like this. Unfortunately, again, it's Thanksgiving, but FBI agents are used to it, especially when it's the shooting of two federal, National Guardsmen that were, protecting the public. So it's going to be an investigation. More and more information will come in. I don't know how much will come out based on they still want to follow leads. As Mark said, who was he communicating with? Who was he talking to? Did they get his phone in a way they can run it right down to the Quantico? If the phone's locked, they can break in the phone, because you want to see encrypted apps. Those are ones that you really can't get through other means. You got to have one of the devices. So you want to get on the phone. You want to start looking at encrypted apps. Who was he talking to? Did any prior knowledge? Like the Halloween one was in a chat group. Was he in a chat group talking about doing this? Did anyone know? Those are all going to be going out, and then leads around the world will probably be going out, especially if his family's still back in Afghanistan. They'll be, they'll have to do it oddly. I was at the League in Afghanistan. We don't have any presence with the Taliban law enforcement, but all those records will be checked. And fingerprints. We did fingerprint a lot of people overseas. So if they fingerprint them, they may have gotten a hit from something that we did over in Afghanistan, because I fingerprinted thousands of people over there.
Tom Major and Rob D'Amico, thanks a lot for joining us tonight. I hope you have a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
We'll bring you all the latest developments as we get them. First, the latest special election that is making Donald Trump and Republicans very nervous. That's next.
It's just a couple of hours ago, and we're still learning everything. We still don't know the motive. It's a somber reminder that soldiers, whether they're active duty, reserve, or National Guard, our soldiers are the sword and the shield of the United States of America.
That was Vice President J.D. Vance earlier today breaking the news of the D.C. shooting to soldiers at Fort Campbell. He was there to serve an early Thanksgiving meal to service members on the Army base, which happens to sit in a bright red congressional district in Tennessee, where a special congressional election is being held next Tuesday to replace Republican Congressman Mark Green, who retired in July. That district, the Tennessee 7th, voted for Trump just last year by 22 points. So this should be a breeze. And yet, check this out. New Emerson College survey shows Republican candidate Matt Van Epps leaning Democrat Afton Bain by only 2% among likely voters. That is within the margin of error in a Trump plus 22 district. This comes a month after Republican losses at ballot boxes across the country. I'm joined now by two former Republican congressmen, Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania and Carlos Curbelo of Florida. Gentlemen, it's good to have you. In these specials, A, they're hard to poll. B, we don't have a ton of public polling, so you don't have like 15 polls you can throw into the average. But you got J.D. Vance down there. You got Trump posting about it on Truth Social, Charlie. And I think from the people I've talked to who are in the district, like there's definitely a sense that this is a competitive race, which that alone seems to me to say something. What do you think?
Well, this race should be a layup for Republicans, as you indicated. But Republicans, since Trump was elected, Republicans have really struggled in special elections. Democrats have overperformed significantly. We saw two special elections for Congress in Florida, where the Republican candidates who held those seats were winning by 30-plus points. And then the Republicans who replaced them won by 12 to 15 points. We saw a special election in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, for the state Senate. Very Republican area near my hometown. Never elected a Democrat since the Civil War. Elected a Democrat, and so I think what we've seen, though, and you add that up with you couple that with what happened a few weeks ago in the off-year election. Republicans have a turnout problem. Trump is turning out Democrats big time. And you said it's hard to poll these districts, these special elections. They are hard to poll. We simply don't know what the turnout will be. But I would be nervous if I were a Republican, just because, the turnout has been terrific for Democrats and pretty lousy for Republicans. So that's where we are right now. Republicans should win this district, Van Epps, but it's going to be awfully close.
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectation is that they will. It'd be sort of shocking if they didn't. Part of what's interesting, Carlos, here is that Mark Green, this got kind of lost, but it was a little bit of a weird move, right? July of the first year in a term, you've been in Congress for a bit, to say, hey, I'm out. He just said, I'm leaving. I've got a private sector opportunity. It's too good to pass up. He went to some startup. You got him, he leaves. You got Marjorie Taylor Greene last week saying, I'm out. I'm not going to run for re-election, but I'm leaving. Then you've got all this buzz from members of Congress speaking to say, Jake Sherman and Punchbowl, that they're thinking of the same thing. What do you think about, how do you make sense of Republicans in the majority just piecing out, midterm?
Chris, this is remarkably similar to the environment that we were living back in 2017 and 18 as we approached the first midterm election of President Trump's first term. There was so much fatigue in the Congress. People left early that year. Our friend who's on this panel with me, Charlie Dent, he retired early from Congress that year. A lot of members decided not to run for re-election because the mood was just so sour. Congress had become less and less relevant, and that has only gotten worse. So I do think you're going to see more Republicans heading for the exit, some early, which of course is extremely relevant this year, right? They only have a couple seat majority. We had a 40-seat majority back in 2018, so we could afford to lose some seats. We could afford to lose some members. This majority cannot afford to lose anyone, but people are frustrated. The executive branch continues making Congress less and less relevant. And to be fair, Congress continues making itself less and less relevant by refusing to take action. And guess what? People don't want to waste their time there anymore. So that's why they're leaving. It's a shame. It's sad. I decided to stick in there and run for re-election, knowing that it was going to be very difficult. But some people have just had enough.
Charlie, I'm going to read you this quote from an anonymous member of Congress talking to Jake Sherman. He says other GOP members messaged us over the weekend saying they too are considering retiring in the middle of the term. Here's one particularly exercised senior House Republican. This entire White House team has treated all members like garbage, all. More explosive early resignations are coming. It's a tinderbox. Morale has never been lower. Mike Johnson will be stripped of his gavel and they will lose the majority before this term is out. What do you think of that?
Well, what I think this means is there are a lot of Republican members of Congress who have witnessed their Article 1 powers being usurped by the executive branch. And in some cases, the Congress has willingly surrendered their authorities to the executive branch. And I think enough of them have had enough. And that's why they're going to head for the X's. If any member is in a district that is what I would say less than an R+10, I would be very nervous right now.